your value as a player is not the same as your value as a person. Far too often they were equating their self-worth as a human with their outcomes as an athlete. That's a really dangerous thing to do that a lot of athletes do.
Kim McCullough is the founder of Total Female Hockey, a former Division I captain at Dartmouth and a professional player in the CWHL. As a Hockey Canada coach developer, she has helped thousands of female athletes see themselves differently. Today, she shares the clarity and conviction she has brought to the female game over the past 2 decades.
You said it took about 4 or 5 years to understand everybody was kind of different, but I'd love to hear your take on what that process kind of felt like for you. How have you evolved through that?
Every pivot, every race, every battle in the corner was conscious and physical. It was just so hard. Remember just driving and being like, I think I'm done. And when I'm checked out and done, like, I'm done.
Every great coach knows you have to say the same 3 or 4 things 1,000 different ways, but the actual practical application of that, I don't see a lot of leaders actually pushing themselves to figure that out for themselves. How can I say the same thing?
I was fast, I was strong, I was athletic. I knew my skills eventually would catch up, but that my intensity was always going to be the lead.
The only difference between the amateur and the pro side is that once you start to professionalize things, so you have to be a lot more mindful of your process.
It's a privilege to have that level of influence. I hope the mindset side of it is what they get most at the end of the day. I had risen to the level of my incompetence. I physically understood why I never made the national team. It was just so hard.
What was the nature that you kind of understood about yourself, who you were naturally?
Oh, it's a great question. I think...
Welcome back to the Evolving Athletes Podcast. I'm Coach Vinny Maltz, and as always, this show is about understanding how mindset actually evolves. Not through theory, not through slogans, but through real life, real sport, and real experience. Today's conversation is one I've been looking forward to for a long time. Our guest is someone I have the utmost respect for, not just because of her resume, which speaks for itself, but because of the clarity and conviction she's brought to the female game over the past 2 decades. Kim McCullough is the founder of Total Female Hockey, a former Division I captain at Dartmouth, a professional player in the CWHL, a Hockey Canada coach developer, and someone who has helped thousands of female athletes see themselves differently. What stands out to me about Kim isn't just what she's accomplished, it's about how she's done it. She didn't just play the game, she studied it, she questioned it, she challenged parts of it, and then she built something better for the next generation. And when you see someone who builds something that lasts, you know there were hard seasons and lessons behind it. There were moments that forced growth, there were internal rewrites, there were standards that had to be raised, first within herself. That's what we're going to explore today. Kim, I'm really grateful you're here. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks, Vinny. It feels like a very full circle moment to be on here. And sometimes I forget how long we've known each other, but this is pretty awesome. And I'm excited to share today about hockey and mindset and whatever else we come up with.
Yeah, exactly. Same. I was thinking about that too. I was like, what is it? I think it was the IYCA days. Does it go back? And there's when we initially...
How we go back.
Yeah, so crazy.
That's like mid 2000s, 2005.
Yeah. Is it still going? Is it still around?
I think it is. I don't know in what capacity, but I think that certification still is out there. I thought it was great. As someone who works with young athletes, I thought it was just cool to have something that was standardized. And, Brian, who started it, was my personal trainer when I was in high school. So talk about full circle. That was just really cool to be involved with and met so many awesome people like yourself. I think anyone who's training young athletes and stays in it for the long haul are pretty awesome humans. So I'm always excited to get involved with organizations like that.
Yeah, amen to that. Amen. Yeah, it's funny. Ironically, I tell a story of how I got into mindset. It was Brian and the whole group when they got into the Mindset Performance Institute and all that stuff. So yeah, it's pretty cool, full circle moment for sure. One of the things I thought was interesting right off the bat, right, is I always like to go back to when you began. And so talk about that story, right? From what I've researched, you started playing hockey at 13, which I was like surprised at. Obviously by elite standards, that's considered late. Was that when you actually began the adventure?
Yeah, I mean, that was my first year playing like organized, I guess, competitive hockey. Yeah. Before that, I grew up across the street from an outdoor rink. So I grew up in downtown Toronto. There happened to be a park across the street that had an outdoor rink, tennis courts, basketball, baseball, soccer. And I think I'd played every other sport there, but didn't really play hockey. I skated a little bit with my parents, like not well. They weren't hockey players. So, we had like rent-a-skates and went over there, and on occasion, like this is not even a weekly thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't really like have a spark for it, or maybe I didn't know other people that were doing it. So I remember when I was like 11, I played house league over there, and I had like total hand-me-down, like the Gordie Howe gloves that went up to your elbows, and
That's
like
unreal.
the plastic Bauer Charger skates. I'm totally dating myself here. Anyone over the age of 40 knows what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
And I was a home dresser. I mean, I was across the street from the rink, so it made sense. I was a home dresser. And I would walk across the street and through the field with no skate guards. Like I would just go. Luckily back then in Canada, it was cold enough that like I wasn't like digging up dirt, but I had no idea. Nobody in my family like knew what you were supposed to have, or like how do I need a curved stick? Just, like everything was wood back then. Anyways, that's where I started. But up until that point, I'd played really competitively basketball and soccer with the boys. I started soccer with the boys since I was 4, and I was always on like the top level competitive team, traveling a lot. And so that was sort of my world. All the boys I went to school with, we would go to this park and play sports. But they were all like AAA hockey players. So there was no invite for me to join them in hockey. But all the other sports that I just happened to be good at, they were happy to have me there. And so the hockey just wasn't a thing other than watching it on, in TSN, or, watching the sports on TV. And then I had a girl join my soccer team. So it was always me and all the boys every tournament. It was like, go down the left side. They have a girl. Like it was exactly what you thought it was in the 80s, being the only girl of any team. And then this other girl joined the team, but only for the summers. And I was like, oh, like we were just besties instantly. But she played AAA hockey. And so she went back to hockey in the winter. And one year she decided to come over to girls hockey, and her dad was going to be the coach. And he's like, oh, you play hockey. Do you want to be on the team? I'm like, sure. And so I went from house league to AA, which is the highest level we have here.
Yeah.
I was for sure the worst player on the team. I mean, I have no recollection of it. There's gracefully no video of any of it. So like total nepotism, that's what got me in the door. But, because I was so competitive in every other sport, and I just was like, there was no way I was going to be the worst. Like there was no way I was going to allow myself to suck at something when it came to athletics, because every other sport I played at school or whatever, I would like quickly rise to the top. So they must have known or seen that mindset in being the soccer teammate, and we ended up going to school together. So it was a bit of a, that crack opened up in the door, and I just blew the thing wide open. And I wouldn't say I was the best player on the team by the end of the year, but something sparked a little differently. Maybe it was being with all girls. That was the first time I'd played sports competitively with all girls. Before it was all school sports, which weren't necessarily that competitive. But it was like that obsession started. Once I started playing competitively, the obsession was like almost instant. And I took all I had learned from all the other sports and brought it to hockey. And, it's interesting to think about it. Often now that I'm in the hockey world now, and I'm coaching my 7 and my 9-year-old daughters both play. Yeah. Like people are so serious so early. And I'm like, guys, I was not, I mean, I couldn't even play, but I think I got serious. When I started, I got serious, and I got serious at the right time. Right. I mean, you would know better than me, Vinny, but that 13, 14, 15, that was the time that I started reading books on mindset and mental performance, which back then, like you had to go to a library, and like I had to like actually like read a book and find the book. And, I started doing workouts and all these things that back then nobody did. But for whatever reason, I knew that was my way forward, because skill wise, I was like a duster. Like I wasn't good. My skating was okay. I didn't have good hands. I didn't have a good shot. I think I had pretty good hockey IQ from the other sports. But for me, like that was the time, if you're going to become obsessed and you really want to get to college hockey or beyond, like that's the time to really be it. I'm not sure that 7 is necessary. I know 7 is not necessary. Yeah. But that was back in the 80s and 90s. So, now everyone's like, oh, well, it's different now. And I'm like, well, I've coached enough girls over the years to go, that really is the sweet spot here in Ontario. That's U15. That's really when players who've been great for a long time because they started earlier, they've had more skills, they might start to drop off because they don't love it. And the ones like me who started a little bit later but really love it, they surpass. And that's the age group, at least in female hockey, that happens. So I was fortunate that was when the bug hit me, and then I just it took off like wildfire from there.
That's what an amazing story and case study too. Because to your point, that's something I point out to parents all the time, is that it's around that 14, 15 mark where now everything gets really serious. So you have to be a lot more mindful of your process because, as you know, right, the only difference between the amateur and the pro side is that once you start to quote unquote professionalize things, so when you start to hit 15, 16 and you're involved in a more serious environment, well, then collectively, you have to pay more attention to the systemic nature of it, the cultural nature of it, right? The expectations that are put on you. It's not just about you and that's it. You're choosing to participate in a really high-end environment. So now it's about others. And that's where I feel a lot of the real mindset work comes in, is that it's good for you to understand yourself, but fundamentally you also have to understand and the environment that I'm participating in. So it's cool how, number one, you hit that sweet spot of when you came in, but then the other side of it too is that with my own son, so he just turned 9, actually he's turned 9 today. So he's going, and to your point, people always ask, and I love that he plays soccer in the off seasons. Right? I talked to my dad about this last year or 2 summers ago, where he's like, "What do you mean? He's not going to skate this summer?" I'm like, "No skating. He's going to play soccer. Watch." And so it's funny, that correlation there is that bring up all the time is my theory on it's simple of you don't need to be skating if you're going to be playing soccer and on the ground and moving, because I think there's a huge correlation between the agility and the movement and the thinking aspect of soccer to hockey in that context. So I love that, that part of it. And the story is pretty awesome. Talk about it from your perspective of when you were hitting that moment, because it is interesting of how you were all in the environment, the conditions, right? Of like, wow, it's the first time I'm going to go in and I'm doing that. What was the nature that you kind of understood about yourself back then when you look back at who you were naturally, right? What was the nature like where for you, it made sense that that's how I did that? Because I think a lot of times when we are younger, a lot of parents, to your point, that might be listening to this, they're very obsessed with what they think they need to keep up with the Joneses versus you clearly had a natural tendency, a personality, a vision, inspired, right? That came behind us. Talk about that part, that who you remember you were naturally, of why you're able to take off at such a late age in that way.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think, well, I have 2 brothers and I'm a middle child. So I'm not a psychologist, but I've read and heard that that's a pretty good indicator of those things. My parents worked a lot when we were kids and we were home alone a lot. And so that park across the street actually became like where my fun was, maybe to escape my brothers. I don't know, but I was over there all the time and no one was pushing me because they weren't there. So all of this was self-driven. I mean, there was never a time my parents were like, you should probably go to this camp, or how come you're not packing your bag? Like I was taking the bus to every practice or getting like a ride. Like now I think I carpool for my daughter's teams. I'm like, I hope my parents like cut a check to all these people who drove me all over the province, because they were never driving me around. So a lot of it was self-motivated. I was a very independent kid. And I think that shone through in my approach to sport. Not only like, going and looking for these mental performance books on my own, or going and I joined a gym and I had no idea what I was doing, Vinny, but I was like in there for 2 hours, like looking at everyone else working out and be like, that looks hard. Like I had no clue, but I was like, I'm going to figure this out on my own, because there were no resources for someone like me to follow back then. So that was the self-motivation, but how it manifested in how I played, as I said earlier, like I'm as competitive as they come. I was always like a speeded up kind of player, like go, 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 whether it was soccer or basketball. Like I wasn't going to pull it back and see. So I was making plays in those other sports at high tempos. And I found in girls hockey, that was something that was intimidating to my opponents. Yeah. It was celebrated by the coaches, like my willingness to like just play on the side of recklessness. Yeah. Especially when I didn't have a lot of skill in the beginning. I was fast, I was strong, I was athletic. So, there's a lot of, kind of like Mighty Ducks moments where the puck just like ended up on my stick, but I don't know how. Yeah. And so that was really like, I knew somehow intuitively that was my only way to survive. I wasn't going to survive by standing around and watching. And certainly being a girl playing boys sports, most of the way through, like standing around and watching, I wasn't even going to make the team. You had to be, physically impactful, maybe even more so than the boys, or else, it sort of worked against you. And so that was just how I survived and thrived in soccer and basketball, playing with the boys. And so it was very natural to bring that over to the hockey side and, leading by example. And, I watched a ton of sports as a kid because I was a latchkey kid. So it was just like me, the TV, and the park. I watched every sport, and you're sort of listening to what the commentators are saying. I don't know that I was like actively thinking about it, but you hear all the like hockey-isms or all the sport-isms that come out during the Olympics of like, this is what you do and this is your approach. And so, in a family that wasn't necessarily, driven by athletics, I think I was, taught by, the sports I saw on TV, and just that inclination to want to compete. And I always had that underdog mentality. Certainly when you're a girl playing with the boys, everyone's counting you out. Everybody wants you to fail. So you're like, okay, I'll show you. And then coming into a sport late, not knowing much about it, but just knowing like, well, I'm clearly not the best here, right? That's an obvious thing. Not, a little bit of that imposter syndrome for sure too, of like, I don't want them to think I'm that bad. Right. And so just fighting for it. And I would say that style of playing stuck with me through probably my entire career, for better or for worse. I don't know that it was always the best strategy, but I was like a human wrecking ball. I was willing to go into all the tough places, scored a lot of ugly goals from the hash marks down. When I played D, like I was a nightmare to play in front of the net. I was that kind of player. And in women's hockey, that player is still a rarity. Yeah. Even, back in the 80s when it was a more of a standardized style of play in the NHL, players who are willing to muck it up and create physically and impose their will on their opponents, that was for sure me. I was not skilled. I did not toe drag. I laugh now, actually, that I teach so many skills. Like, I had to actually teach myself how to toe drag to teach it to like the kids, because I'm like, I don't know how to do this. I was teaching, like, I call it a heel to heel, but like the 10 and 2, the mohawk. I'm like, I for sure never did this.
No, right.
When I play. What is a mohawk? What is an outside edge? Like in the 80s, it was all inside edges and like crash and bash, right? So anyways, that was who I was as a person, very much manifested in the way that I played, in the way that I saw myself climbing the ladder. I knew my skills eventually would catch up, but that my intensity, my willingness to work, like my work capacity, and my mindset of like wanting to prove everyone wrong, was always going to be the lead. And it was in every sport I played, and even in, the business that I run now. It's the same. So I was very true to myself. And I'm sure if you ask my parents, I was probably that way when I was 5 years old too. So I think that's, often now coaching kids, you want them to be true to themselves and not try to be something that they're not. And the cool thing about hockey is there's a place for all of it. Speed it up, slow it down, more cerebral, more just go. A team of 17, 20 players. There's a space for everybody to succeed like that. So that's been pretty cool to see. When I first started coaching, I thought everybody was like me. Right. And I would get so frustrated. I'm like, how come you're not doing more? And how come you're not doing this? And blah, blah, blah. And it probably took me 4 or 5 years to like start to figure out that, the pieces of the puzzle don't need to all be the same to make it fit. So, but yeah, long story short, I am who I am. I don't think I've changed much in however many years I've been around. But I think that mindset was set very early on, and just carried me all the way through my playing career for sure.
Yeah, I love that. And the dynamics too, and the variables are really interesting, right? Like I was thinking about later on down the line to get into, but you walked into it perfectly from a coaching standpoint as a parent, right? Like talk about that aspect of you had this experience. You're clearly a very mindful, right? Thoughtful human being. And you can recognize the experience that you had through the process and the conditions and the environment and the culture and everything that was going on at that time versus now. How are you dealing with that, as a parent and as a coach, where you're balancing that mindset between how I'm being able to teach my own kids, but also at the same time, being able to keep that lens going of where I know there's a natural tendency to this. How have you evolved through that? Because you said it took about 4 or 5 years to understand everybody was kind of different. But I'd love to hear your take on what that process kind of felt like for you, especially from a parenting, And then also I'm also coaching. So it kind of like pulls together.
Yeah, I mean, my first 15 years of coaching, I coached other people's kids, which is great. Like I could do anything I want and just send them on their merry way. Then I started coaching my own kids, and I was like, oh, you're still around. Okay, this is different. And I had been told, of the challenges of it, so I wasn't, naive to the challenges that were before me. So my son's my oldest. He's 11. He doesn't play hockey. He's never showed an interest in hockey or a team sport. He's very much an individual sport guy, and his mindset and his approach to life and sport is very similar to my husband. So in some ways, they sort of siloed together. My middle daughter, the 9-year-old, is my carbon copy. Anyone who meets her, my dad always laughs that it's like just like the little version of me. And so that's challenging in that, we approach things very much in the same way. However, I lived that, for the most part. She's 9. Like I see a lot of that same stuff, and I understand. I can almost predict when she's going to get frustrated. I can predict when she's going to be really excited about how she played. She's very much a team first kind of kid, would rather pass than score, is looking for validation because, again, has a bit of that underdog mindset. And maybe that's something we've just fostered at home. So it's a challenge in that we're very similar, but in some ways made a little bit easier in that I've done it for so long with everybody else. Yeah. I know she's similar to me. And a lot of my success in hockey was from the hockey IQ, creativity, being able to see the game, not being scripted. Because I came so late, it wasn't like I was like, okay, this last coach told me to dump and chase, and this other one told me to do this. I was like, what's this sport? So I've tried to foster that playing free in her. And, again, she's somewhat analytical. I mean, all girls are sort of coach pleasers for the most part. Yeah. But she's very willing to get outside the box. And I was that same way as a player, and I'm that same way as a coach. So, while she pretends not to listen to me, I know she listens to my podcast. I know she listens when I'm talking to her on the ice, even though we butt heads, because I can see it in the way that she plays the game. Our youngest is 7, and she's a goalie, and I am not a goalie. I've never been a goalie. I've never coached goalies other than in a team environment. And she's the one who's like kind of the most different of the 3 kids. If one lines up with my husband, the other one lines up with me. She's completely different, which maybe sings to why she's a goalie. And that's been really interesting because, we have a goalie coach that comes to practice. And when she's in the game, she's nowhere close to me. Right. So whatever I'm telling the team or coaching them, she's not necessarily privy to that when she's in net. Certainly when I'm around the rest of the team, I can see like she's very much like protective of her teammates. So if she thinks I'm being mean to them or I'm not being tough, if I'm being too tough on them, she's, Mom, you're being too mean and this kind of stuff. So I can tell she's got this like team first kind of mentality. And she definitely has the goldfish brain. Like, she can let in 4, she can make 3 breakaway saves, and she's like, where are we going after the game? Like, just not burdened by it. Whereas my middle one who plays defense is a little bit more like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, which was, again, the way that I played. So, I think it's been, fun having coached so many different players over the years and trying to figure out, not just teaching them the skill and the structure that you want. I don't even like to use that word structure, maybe the shape that you want. That stuff's easy. It's figuring out like how to say it in a way or communicate it in such a way that kid with that personality really works for them, right? So if you have a player who's very analytical or very detail oriented, everything I say to them, they're going to like do exactly, exactly the way I prescribe it. And we know hockey is a game of chaos. We're chasing rubber around on knife blades. Like, this is crazy. So a player who's too analytical, there's a place for that. But you would speak to them very differently than the player who's like, yeah, coach, whatever. I'm just going to go chase the little black thing around. And so figuring out how to do that, how to message that in a team environment. This is not an age where like we're having individual player meetings. We got 2 practices a week. I see them at the games. They're more excited about the sleepover afterwards than they are like focused on the opponent. But I still think there's a great opportunity to kind of figure out their individual mindsets and how, which one you can be tough on. Like, I know I can be tough on my middle one, and she thrives like not in a mean way, but if I'm hard on her, she will respond in terms of her on ice performance in a positive way. There's other players that I know if I said that same thing, they would crumble. And so we've got 17 players on a team. How are you personalizing that message? And I think that's, the hardest thing as a coach, because you can't necessarily get all those touches in every practice or every game. And how do you pick your moments, and how do you know who's the right kid to talk to? And after having done it for 20 years, like, I kind of go, okay, I got to talk to that one and that one. If I can get that one going, if I can tell her this, and that's a bit of the gift of coaching, right? I think anyone can read a practice plan and blow a whistle and get kids to do a drill. Although I do tell everyone, like, if you haven't coached U7, like, I'm not sure you're really an elite coach. Like, you need to go and like deal with the can barely stand up. What's the neutral zone? Like, how do I hold my stick properly? Like, solve that problem and then tell me about how you're like coaching in the OHL or the AHL or something, right? But that how you connect with each player, I think, is so critical. And I've been fortunate. I've been coaching a lot of these same players since they began competitive hockey. So some of them I've had for 3 or 4 years now, and they've changed a lot. I mean, they were 6 years old when I first got them, but a lot of them are still the same in terms of their mindset and their want to please, or their want to create, or their want to create chaos. So it's cool to see that evolution. Whereas previously, whether I was coaching university hockey or top level junior, you're kind of cycling through players every year or two. You don't have this relationship. You don't see this development for the most part. They're kind of fully formed. I know we can influence a lot their mindset, but at that age, junior and college, it's a lot harder to tweak the way they think about themselves, the way they process the game. So it's really cool at this young age to have that level of influence and impact. And realize when I get it wrong. Sometimes I'm way too hard on them. I think I need to push when I needed to pull back. Like, I haven't solved it. But I love the challenge of it. I still get nervous before every game going, like, I love a pregame speech. It's like, of all the things I'm good at, the pregame and the in-between period speech is like, if you need to hire anyone out, I don't think there's any money in it, but like, that's my special thought. Going to everyone, I'm like, oh, should I say this? How do I say this? How do I approach this? And again, maybe I'm overthinking it, but I just know how impactful your words can be. And I tell my kids that all the time, right? Like, it's like toothpaste. You can't put it back in the tube. So whatever you say, especially when you're in a room of 10-year-old girls, they're going to remember. And I know it's a privilege to have that level of influence. And I hope that I'm not ever exploiting it or taking advantage of it. But I just, I can only imagine, the 10-year-old version of me having a female who had the experience I had, like telling me to go and do this on the forecheck. I'd be like, whatever you want, you got it. You got all of me doing it, right? And I see that in them, and so it's just a privilege and a joy to be able to do it. But I won't say it's easy. There's definitely some car rides home where I am biting my tongue, and as we all do as parents. But I see the path, and I have no idea what they want to do long term, Vinny. Like, no idea. I always say to them, if you want, we're watching the Olympics. You want to go there? Like, I probably know a few things. I can probably help you, but you're getting out of bed at 6 a.m. if you want to do it. It's not going to be me.
That's it.
Right? I'll be up because I get up early, but like, if you want more, you know where to find it. We have no idea where they're going to end up, if they're going to end up anywhere in sport. But to me, it's their approach, the way they process it, how they process challenges, how they process victories and losses and playoffs and, tournament, all that stuff. The physical, whatever. Like, I don't remember the scores. Like, I know we won some trophies. I know in college we won a lot, but like, that's not the stuff I remember. But I do remember like the mental challenges going into that big game. And I almost feel the butterflies now from talking about it. Right. How was I going to get ready to play Team USA or play Harvard in the national championship or whatever that was? That was so much harder or more of a challenge than like, what shot was I going to use or how was I going to skate on the forecheck? Like that to me is such a small piece of it compared to your approach mentally of how you're going to be your best self, whatever that is on a given day. And I hope the players that I coach beyond the skills and the structures that I've taught them, that mindset side of it is what they get most at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Brilliant. And what's really key that you pointed out that's so important is you touched on how you present the information. I think that is something that from a leadership standpoint, every great coach knows you have to say the same 3 or 4 things 1,000 different ways, but the actual practical application of that, I don't see a lot of leaders actually pushing themselves to figure that out for themselves. How can I say the same thing, frameworks, concepts, different ways to present the same material, but I'm going to say it. So GPS, right? We hit traffic, boom, reroute, go a different way. Talk about that aspect for you personally, because whether it's coaches are listening or parents are listening, right? Are there any go-to frameworks that you're using or concepts for you personally on when you talk about connecting with players, right, and how you use it? Is there something that you look at, or is it different between parent mode versus coach mode, or is it the same? But how do you kind of keep the balance, right? Because I know for all of us, we're busy. There's a lot on our minds. There's a lot going on. So we have to use something to anchor us, right? Some type of strategy to keep us in sync. What's that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, every team I've coached probably for the last 15 years has had the same framework. And in terms of, how we play, sort of generally, and just our approach to the game. And I'll share it here. I've shared it before. I call it the fist, and we actually use like a visible fist. Mm-hmm. And so for me, that's fast, smart, tough together, which the 9-year-olds like to remind me that's not spelled correctly, but that's fist. And so, we want to play fast. We want to play smart. We want to play tough. We want to play together. And so that is our anchor in terms of our style of play. And that's shared with all the coaches, all the parents, and all the players. So there's no secrets here of what we're trying to do. And again, I just use that with the Icelandic national team that I coached at the World Championship. It's fist. It's the same with my daughter's U11 team. It's the same. And so we're always going, touching back on that. All our skills are sort of geared towards that. All our shapes are geared towards that. But when I come in before a game to address the team, they're expecting something about fast, something about smart, something about tough, and something about together. And we always have that structure. On occasion, it's something a little more measurable, like, okay, for fast, we're going to get, shots within 5 seconds of winning a faceoff. Like that's a kind of a standard hockey one, right? So that's measurable. How many? Let's get 10 of those this game, or whatever that is. And smart, it might be, we're going to move the puck east-west 10 times this game. Okay, then it's measurable. And I find the girls like those measurable things. I don't know that they're always able to actualize it. So there's sort of an age or a timing where it makes more sense to do it. Certainly with my older players, we're doing like specific numbers as much as we can over a number of games. So over the next 3 games, these are our fist goals, our check marks, and here's what we're going to try to do. But I find that anchors them. They have an expectation of how they're going to be addressed before the game, of the fact that it's chaos out there, and they have 3 or 4 things that I believe as a coach are going to lead our team to success. It's a process goal as opposed to an outcome goal. And coaching young hockey, like it's all about the outcome. If we don't win, like we play badly, whether that's like the player, the coach, the parents, right? Like that it is. Wins and losses are the currency. I think at the older age groups, that's actually quite a bit different. But at the younger age groups, that's a huge part of the currency. And so to have those anchors about the process, to communicate them to the parents, I think these kids are lucky. I do video breakdowns with them for like little arrows going everywhere. Like you can imagine U11s are like, whoa, that's cool. So I actually don't do it in person because I've met them all. I know there's no like capacity to like sit still for 10 minutes to do that. Okay. So I email them out, and the parents and the kids can watch it on their own, and you can tell who's watched it and who hasn't. But to me, it's about the collective. And I constantly remind kids at this age that it's hockey, not golf, right? Because a lot of their success up until this point, the reason they've reached the level they have is because of their individual success, their individual skills. It's not because they were making some tic-tac-toe plays. It's because they carried the puck, or they stopped the one-on-one, or they made the big save. And I find this age group, this U10, U11, like is finally where they're like, no, there's a whole bunch of you. And if we all play together, we're going to be that much more effective. And so, that is hard. You've still got some parents out there who are like paying kids for goals and, grandparents who are doing the same and that kind of stuff. So, you have to fight that mindset. And they still perceive that that's how they impact the game. If they didn't score, get a point, or they didn't get a shutout, they weren't good. So trying to, fight that a little bit and set some standards over, what the process is. And then I encourage them, to do the same for themselves, right? And I can't actually get in the brain of a 9-year-old. I can only imagine what they're thinking of going into a game. But to me, it's about intention. Is there one thing you could do today? And I gave them all little notebooks and a little golf pencil where they can write it down. And they have like a little, I don't know, you call it like a kit bag. They put their tape in. And you do see some of them like writing it down or looking at their little book. And some of them probably are just drawing pictures in it. But, that idea of I'm going into this game and I'm going to do this for the team. Now, this is, I'm going to listen to the coach and I'm going to talk about the fist and blah, 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 blah. But like, here's how I'm going to impact the game based on my own strengths. And that's something, whether I'm talking to 8-year-old girls or 28-year-old women, like owning your strengths, I think is the most powerful thing. Because there's so many different kinds of hockey players. There's so many kinds of different people. And I think often, especially with women, we get so caught up in the things that we aren't good at. And, oh my God, I can't do that. I'm at a tryout. Oh my God, that girl went end to end. I'm not a rushing D. Like, what do I do? Well, don't rush the puck. That's not your strength, right? But owning those and understanding that can have a really powerful impact on the game. If that gets taken away from any team I coach, and they can apply that in hockey and sport in life, I think that's probably the most powerful piece of it all. And I hope that resonates with the players. Certainly, I have more touch points with them than I do with the parents. But that's my hope, is that they go, you know what? I do bring value here and I can make an impact on every shift. And it's not always because, I did something amazing. And maybe when they get in older age groups and higher levels, they're sitting on the bench in the third period, or they're sitting in the stands, or they're the backup goalie. And to still understand that they can have an impact in the game, right? About how they talk to their teammates or how they present themselves, how they walk into the rink when they know they're a healthy scratch. I mean, that stuff is so important. And I remember learning that stuff when I was like 15 and 16, because I read these mindset books that I still have, like the Hockey Tough, which I don't think was called Hockey Tough when it first came out. Had a different name.
Yeah.
And like In Pursuit of Excellence. And like, these were the only books I could find at the library. And like, I probably have them up on my shelf here, Vinny. Like, they're so dog-eared and like falling apart. And I just I didn't know that other people didn't do this, but I recognize now how much reading those books and doing those exercises that I still do with my players now, like at that time, back in the 90s, like how much further that got me ahead in the absence of skill.
Yep.
Right? So I was not as skilled, but I had the mental performance. I had the off-ice training. I didn't really get the nutrition dialed till I was a little bit older, but those, I call that the not so sexy stuff. Like, no one gets excited by drinking more water, eating more vegetables, but that, or like setting goals. But that was the stuff that I really doubled down on, because I knew like I couldn't just double down on the skills and magically be able to toe drag. Like, that was going to take time. And so while the players I coach now, the young ones, were not necessarily like hammering home the not so sexy stuff. I know for me, that mental piece was the difference, especially when I finally got to what I would consider high performance hockey, which would have been college hockey. I think up until that point, I tried really hard and we were competitive, but I wouldn't have really considered it high performance in terms of the expectations on you physically, mentally, performance-wise, until I got to university. And I was struck, very early in my university career by how little some of my teammates had done in terms of the off-ice training, but more importantly, the mental. Like, I was the worst player on the ice at our first skates. Like, guaranteed. I was like fourth liner. I actually was a D. And after the second skate, the coaches called me in and told me I was going to be a winger. I never played forward in my whole life. So clearly they weren't, like, I wasn't running the power play, Vinny. Like, I was at the bottom of the barrel. But I remember, like, that didn't hurt my feelings. I was like, okay, I got this. And I remember one specific moment, like I can still visualize it on the ice. going to a practice, and the coach, my coach was wonderful. She was still one of my mentors. She said, okay, power play down here and everyone else down there. And I was like, I'm obviously everyone else. And like me and the other freshmen and some of the other players went. And the amount of whining and complaining, I'm like, oh, she called us everyone else. And what are we supposed to do? And I was like, what is wrong with you? Like, we're going to penalty kill. And when I went out and penalty killed these chosen people in the power play, I was like a dog on a bone. I was the Tasmanian devil. I was like, okay, I know I suck, but like, here's how I'm going to make my impact. And I think that moment was transformative to go like, oh, we're not all built the same way, or maybe you haven't had access to the same tools I have. But I know, in my freshman year, I was a D who got converted to forward. I was on the fourth line. By Christmas, I was on the second line. I finished the year with 27 points, and I went to Team Canada camp in the spring. And I was the last one in the door. And part of that was the hockey, but mostly it was the mental, and it was the fact that I'd done all this off-ice training. I was the fittest player on the team. After a hard workout, my teammates had to crawl up the stairs, and I was like, ready to go. And so that's the narrative I've been sort of sharing for 20 plus years with Total Female Hockey, is that, yes, you have to have the skill. I had enough skill. I did not have elite skill, but I was pretty elite in a couple other key areas. And that's actually what got me ahead. And, watching the Olympics, like, those people are amazing. Like, I watch those skiers, Vinny, like, and then I'm like, they go down that jump backwards.
It's nuts.
Like, are you nuts? What are you doing that backwards? Like, if I was your mom, I'd be like, oh. Anyways, like, and I know, like, it looks so cool and they can spin 700 times in the year, but like, no one's talking about like how they drank enough water, or they piled workout after workout, or all the rehab they did when they blew out their knee. Like, again, that stuff that no one talks about is actually why they're an Olympian. Because they embrace the suck for longer than everybody else, and they stuck with it when it got really hard. Like, there's no one there who's like, oh, it's just amazing. Maybe Connor McDavid, like, who was just amazing the whole way. I don't think that's the narrative for most of them. And I knew Connor when he was 10. He was amazing back then. So like, he might be true to that narrative, and maybe there's 5% of Olympians who were that. But the rest of them were humans like us, and like, they just fought for it. And so I like the Olympics because they talk about that a little bit more, whereas like pro sports, it's like they just fell from the sky fully formed like this. Anyways, I could talk all day. I'm going to let you throw a question in there, else I'll just do that mic for us.
No, I love that. This is great stuff. What you really touched on too was the strengths aspect. I think that gets, it's starting to become cliche, which is nice to hear. Oh, it's about your strengths, but I don't think people really understand from a mental perspective of the importance of that. Like, I look at it as, that's just your natural way of thinking, right? That's what I think a lot of people miss about focusing on a person's strengths, is that if I'm going to align with who you are naturally, you're going to think a lot less, right? How often I'm shocked at how much I'll ask a player when they have an amazing shot, right? Worked with a player, had him in the program, US program, and amazing shot. I'm like, oh, all right, what are you doing to work on your shot? Oh, I don't work on it at all. I'm like, wait, what? So it was like shocking to me that here you are making a pretty big pinnacle thing at junior level at U17, and you never worked on your shot. Like, you just naturally, and didn't realize it. And then once you started to put some frameworks in and started to realize, oh, I'm going to put in, 20, 30 shots a day, just a simple protocol. He couldn't believe how much more control he had of the puck and how much more confidence he had, where he was like, wow, I didn't realize I could take it to a whole nother level. So to your point, right, inside of this is what's always challenging for people, is that when they hear the strengths-based language, they don't recognize there's a natural tendency that's attached to that. And I think so much of what you shared so far is, this is your nature, right? This is just how you are built. And I think that's the part that a lot of people have to realize, that digging into your nature, who you are naturally, what you know about yourself, but then participating with others and knowing, well, they all have their own natures as well. And that's really what I'm forming into, so I love that aspect of it. But, more from your story, I know that you shared publicly that, parts of your playing career felt you were tired, injured, frustrated. And, those are interesting to me because, when was that first time that you felt like the way you were operating just wasn't sustainable in that way? Because a lot of when you start talking about the frameworks of what you're saying, right, you've found how to sustain it within this process. As a parent, coach, I've done it for a lot of years. Hey, I've got the experience, the wisdom behind me. But what was it like when you were going through that time when it was like, I'm exhausted? This is brutal. Because I think in today's game, especially, a lot of younger players and even adults for that matter feel that exhaustion and sometimes think that how I play is going to be based off of how I feel, as opposed to kind of like the other way around of, well, that's the work that you have to do. You've got to figure out how to play within that tired, exhausted feel. So talk about what that process was like for you and how you kind of evolved through that.
Yeah, totally. I think like I started to feel it in high school, and I think that it was self-inflicted. Because I was such a go hard. I was elite in 3 different sports. And back then you didn't really specialize. No one really asked you to, so I just kept doing all 3 all the time. Plus I was doing gym workouts, plus I was doing, more and more and more. And again, no one was telling me to do it. That was my nature. And again, especially in hockey, because I felt like I was behind, I felt like I had to do more. And so, had a lot of sprained ankles, from soccer. And, that's what I always say, that's why my edge work is bad, but, I got really good inside edges. But I had a lot of like ankle stuff. I had to go to like physio quite a bit. Ended up having like some lower back issues, which became more of an issue as I got higher levels in the sport. I was sort of that classic Wayne Gretzky bent over at the waist type of skater. And because I was playing, what I would call high impact hockey, and every stop and every turn and nothing was like light on my feet. It was like pounding the ice. I laugh like it's my daughter's like the complete polar opposite of me as a skater. Like we don't even look like we are remotely related when it comes to skating. But everything I did was hard. And then you've compounded that with the off ice training, which I think helped. I can only imagine without that off ice training, maybe I would have been more injured. But this was also, in a different era of strength and conditioning. I worked out where the Maple Leafs trained. That's where I met Brian Grasso. That's where I met Matt Nickel, who's I still see all the time here in Toronto. They were the trainers back then, and essentially my workouts were the same as what the Leafs were doing. Like not exactly, but like I'd be on the bike next to Eric Lindros, being like, "Hi," like, and it's not that we didn't know better, but back then in strength and conditioning, it was just like heavy and hard all the time. And again, that got me ahead because no one else was doing anything. So to have that level of expertise and that intensity, and again, everyone around me was some guy playing college hockey or playing, low level pro, whatever it was. And I was like, well, I'm just like the 16-year-old girl. So like, I better level up here. Like I can't be out here with the pink weights. And that was never, never was going to have the pink weights, but I'm like an extra 10 on the bar, an extra 20 on the bar. So I think a lot of it was self-inflicted. But it was also like celebrated in the fact that I went so hard. Right. So like that was like might have been my special gift. And so nobody ever said like, maybe you should pull it back a little bit. Right. Like maybe you shouldn't amplify this strength quite as much. And so, it was fine during college. I would say, I felt good as, a college athlete. Like you're never really operating at 10 out of 10. Just like I tell my players now, if you're a 3 out of 10, like you should, like there's some days I walk into the rink as a coach and I'm like, I'm a -2 out of 10, but like I'm here. So I better squeeze whatever juice I got out of it. And I tell my players the same way. There's so few times you're going to walk into the rink and feel 10 out of 10. Oh, yeah. And so even if you're an 8 or a 7 or a 4, you got to get 100% of that 4 out of you. And I excelled at that. I'd get 150% out of the 4. Like I could just like squeeze that juice all the way out. Like any workout we did that was like a suffer fest. Like I would like I'm going to win that workout every single time. And so again, that was part of my identity as an athlete. It was celebrated. I took full ownership of it. And that cost me, I think when I got up to, the higher levels, like into pro, when I had tryouts with Team Canada, because I had gotten so much by on effort. And it was when I finally moved to Calgary and I was playing alongside the 2002 Olympic team. So all the, the Wickenheisers and the Goyettes and the Cassie, like they had just won an Olympic gold medal. And then little old me shows up and I could play with them, but I was a passenger. I wasn't a driver. But what really struck me, like I think I was at their level in terms of mentality and focus. I mean, Haley Wickenheiser's like on a whole other level, like she's an alien. But the rest of them, I was like, yeah, I'm in the same stratosphere. In the gym, same stratosphere. Where I wasn't on the same level was how easily they could execute the skills on the ice based on their reads. So for me, I would see a play, I would make a decision, and then effort came, right? Whereas for them, it just seemed effortless, right? And I was making the same read. I saw the same plays at them. I wasn't behind in hockey IQ, but every pivot, every race, every battle in the corner was conscious and physical. And I just got the sense they were like, it's just what I do. And so, very quickly after that first season, I could see like my energy, my ability to replicate that day after day. Remember, I'm at the bottom of the lineup. My ability to be the go hard every day was just so hard. And I always say that's when I had like risen to the level of my incompetence. Like I understand now, I physically understood why I never made the national team. Like at the point up until then, I'd lead my college team in scoring. I'd get invited to these camps. I'd lead the camp in scoring. I'm like, how come they aren't picking me? The classic sort of, I'm sure the guys are the same way. How come I'm not getting drafted? How come I'm not getting in the lineup in pro? And I was feeling that same way. And I'm so grateful that I got that opportunity to skate alongside all those Olympians and go, oh, now I actually feel it. Like before, they're just telling me on the phone, oh, you didn't make it, or I'm getting a letter in the mail. Now I'm like, oh, now I feel why, right? Because these workouts, like you said, you're going into a game and it's the first year after the Olympics. So like, that's kind of like the volume year. So you're just doing like a lot of workouts, and we would go into games and like, we could barely lift up our leg to like put our shin pads and skates on. And there was an expectation you're just going to go and do it. And again, I was easy for me to suffer. Like I could suffer with the best of them, but I couldn't do it on the ice in such a way that like made it look easy. And so for me, that was, sort of the frustration. After that, I played there for a year and a half, and then I went back to Toronto. And I had a serious back injury one of my years of pro. I got hit from behind in a game, and it wasn't sort of instant pain, but it was the girl got thrown out. And on the bus ride home from Montreal, like everything kind of went numb. And like, it was like I had a rod in my back. And some number of days later, I was playing pro, but I was working as a personal trainer. I got up at some ungodly hour and sneezed. And by the end of the day, my left leg was totally numb. And I don't think that was like the manifestation of all the years of doing it wrong. I think that's just got hit from behind and it happened. And I don't know. I just,
It could be.
I had very few times where I went out and felt 1,000% out there, but it didn't matter what percent I was at. You were always getting 1,000% from me. So now when I think about it in hindsight, I did things for recovery. I did yoga tapes like on VHS. This is how old I am. Like VHS in my college dorm, my little college dorm. And I had like an easy one. I still do it actually on YouTube. Like I found it on YouTube. It's a great workout. I still do this yoga tape. It was like all the music and like everyone's wearing white and there's clouds. I'm like, what am I doing? But anyways, I do that one day a week. And then there was another one that was hard. And like I would, as most hockey players, like I'm not flexible, Vinny. Like it doesn't look good when I'm doing yoga. Like I feel like I'm doing it, but I'm not doing it. And this other one was hard, and it was just a suffer fest. And I did these twice a week all the way through college. And because I'd had these injuries and I'd heard, and again, I was always researching, always learning. And I must have read or heard somewhere that this was, going to increase my performance. And so I think in the absence of that, I can just imagine how much more challenges I would have had in terms of injuries. I think that decision by me, and trust me, like I didn't want to do it. One was 30 minutes, the easy one. The other one was 45 minutes. And like 5 minutes in, I'm like, what am I doing?
You're out. Yeah.
I am not a ballerina. I'm not a yogi. Like what? But I do think somehow I must have just known that was what was going to sustain me for like the rough and tumble style of hockey that I was going to play. I had to counteract that with something, right? And I think that's, the counterbalance, whether it's within your sport, within your training, within how you exist in the world. Like I can't be go, go, go all the time. And that's my natural tendency. So I have to find ways to turn it off and offset it. And I think that's challenging for players, maybe not so much for younger players, but certainly older players. And I think looking back on my career, I wish I had done a better job of balancing like the non-hockey piece because I was so focused, so intense, go, go, go all the time that I think, you watch Olympics now and they're like, and she knits on her days off and she draws and they cook. And
Yep.
I do all that stuff now, but I don't know that I did a lot in my prime. And I wonder if that mental shift to something else on occasion would have made me feel fresher mentally. And I don't know that I could have solved the physical stuff because that wasn't my nature.
Yeah.
But I think that mental piece to be able to disconnect or turn it off is still something I struggle with to this day. Sometimes I watch really trashy television, and that's how I turn it off. But yeah, so I think I think a lot of elite athletes, they go through those challenges, whether it's a surgery or an injury or something.
Yeah.
And it was always noise in the background of me. It was like that's just what it is. You just play through it. Yeah, you don't, however many concussions I had, I'm sure you had your lion's share. Like, I had a ton. I had bad ones, and you were like, "Okay, I feel fine. Like, let's go." So yeah, that probably wasn't great either. But again, back then, you just sucked it up and you kept going, and that it wasn't even that it made you tough. It was just like that was normal.
Right.
And probably of all the injuries I sustained, that's probably the one. I think now looking back on it, it's treated so differently. That maybe had that been treated differently, I would have had a little bit of a pause to reflect on, how I ended up in that situation, how I ended up with so many of those injuries, and maybe that would have helped me balance out a bit more. But that wasn't the culture, 90s, 2000s. Like, you just shook it off and kept going.
Not even close. Oh, you nailed it. Of Brad Stulberg talks about in The Way of Excellence. I forget the exact concept and term. I'll go back, take a look at it, but he talks about the anti-fragility of mastery, of how we become so hyper obsessed with our craft, with one craft, and that's it, as opposed to put that energy into elsewhere, the yoga. Okay, this is my other thing, right? Put it into meditation, going for a walk, whatever it is, right? Like playing an instrument. But the idea is that you don't have to feel this sense of all in on just one thing. You want to feel a sense of all in on multiple things. And that creates this anti-fragility concept for that excellence of like, we get so obsessed with our one art, not realizing, wait a second, I could be obsessed with a different art. I don't have to be a professional at it, but I can be obsessed with another art or anything else. And that actually helps me. Right. So to your point with
I love that. And I love that. And I think, that's been a truism in women's hockey forever. I mean, none of us were making a living off of it. Even when I played pro, I didn't get paid. Like, everything was paid for. But I wasn't like making Connor McDavid money. And so we always knew that the academic side of it had to be there. Like that was really what you were going to do long term. And so, female hockey players aren't skipping college to go play pro, right? And so I think that was a grounding. And, I was always a nerd. I am a nerd. So going to an Ivy League school was definitely the right fit for me academically. I didn't find it overly challenging. I wasn't pulling all-nighters. It was very intellectually stimulating. I majored in molecular biology and moral philosophy, neither of which I use in any way, shape, or form now, other than the learning and all of that. But I think in the absence of that, right? Because when you're at an Ivy League school, and I can't speak to the non-Ivies, but in your Ivy League school, I mean, it really is like hockey and school, and like you go into the frat when you can. But if you want to have any success in those two, there's a lot of time and energy going towards both of them. And so I think that created a natural balance. And I had that same desire to succeed in the classroom as I did on the ice. And I think that got a little bit lost when I went to pro, because I was working as a personal trainer because I had to. But then, the hockey, became a little bit more of the focus. And like I said, I didn't hate it. I actually quite liked it. But I could have done better to have something to offset it a little bit more, because there was a lot more downtime. In college hockey, you practice every day. You've got 4 hours of classes, you're eating with your teammates, you've got meetings, like the whole day is full. When I got to pro, I was like, I just have like an hour and a half tonight, and I'm working for 2 hours this morning, and what else is filling this void? And I filled the void with workouts and more mental and blah 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 blah. And it would have probably served me quite well to have something else as more of a balancing point. And I'm sure or I'm hopeful to think, whether it's the PWHL players, the NHL players, that, they're doing the same thing. I mean, their schedule is a lot more arduous than ours was when we were playing pro, but, I think that's where the longevity comes from. And I was fortunate to play 6 years of pro, and I chose to walk away from the game and start my business. But, there became a significant point in my final year. I'd never had this feeling before. Driving to the rink, I don't know how familiar you are with downtown Toronto, but the traffic sucks.
Insane.
And at this point, I lived in the city, and my final year pro, we played in Burlington, which is, if there's no traffic, which never happens, if there's no traffic, it's like a good 35, 40 minutes.
Yeah.
In traffic, when your practice starts at 6:30 p.m., it's like a 2-hour drive, right? And you're just like, you're right in downtown Toronto, like the whole like business district, like disaster. And I remember that season was really hard. That was when we're switching the league over. I was part of the governance of the league. We're switching it over to like more of a centralized model, as opposed to each team kind of operating as its own franchise. And I was involved in the governance of the league, and I was a representative for our team. And because we were changing the structure, a lot of the current owners didn't like it, and my current owners really didn't like it. And they thought I was like a bad guy for wanting to be involved with it. And as a result of that, actually the coach started to cut my ice time. So, I was a high level player there, and, I would be in the top D pair. I'd be on the power play, all of that. And as the season went on, I was sort of being like very honestly, like they weren't hiding this from me, that this was what was happening. But I tried to like turn it off and be like, no, maybe I just suck, or like I'm getting old, or whatever it is. And I remember having teammates and friends of mine who were on the national team are like, how come you're not playing more? Like, are you hurt? Like, what's happening? And probably as a result of that, and part of the eagerness to give back to the game, remember just driving out there for some 2-hour jaunt at 0 miles an hour to Burlington, being like, I think I'm done. And when I'm checked out and done, like, I'm done. And so that was my final year. And then I started Total Female Hockey like some months later, like not long after. And that's what I've been doing ever since. So, I always wonder in other hockey players how many times they have that thought, because I only ever had it once. And the once was enough to like close it down. And I just hope I'm never the coach that makes them feel like they want to stop playing. Right? That's a big motivator for me to go like, I don't want to be the person that they go, nah, I've had enough of this. I don't know how successful I've been in that regard, but that's always in the back of my mind, to not be the one who makes them not be excited to come to the rink anymore.
Yeah, that's awesome. And at the same time, sobering comment for any leader and coach is, how often do you step back and actually think about that? Is that you might have been the one that basically had them pull away. And to your point, I remember when, I retired, it was kind of like similar feel of like, I just knew, I was like, all right, time to go, relax. I ended up having a back injury. I was just like, all right, enough is enough. I need to take a break. And I just knew and realized and got into coaching and all that. And took a similar-ish path at the time of like, all right, hey, loving coaching and time for the next chapter. So as you moved into that phase, right, and you made the shift from the player to the builder, right, and you founded Total Female Hockey, what initially, when you got in, what was that truth that you felt you needed to address, right? When you look back on it, what was the part of, all right, here's where I can help, or did that come maybe a couple years into it? But what did you feel that it was like the itch of the truth that's like, here's what is driving me, that I want to be a part of that mission?
Same thing drives me forward now. It's like, what would the 13-year-old Kim would have wanted? Like if first of all, I didn't have a website when I was 13 I could have gone to, but like if there was a book or a website or a show or a newspaper clipping that even like mentioned women's hockey, I was all over it. I remember growing up in downtown Toronto, like walking down Bloor Street, it's a main shopping street, and they had the Nike store. And I remember going in there, and they had like workout shoes, and they had like different workouts of different athletes. And they had like this written out workout of like a Canadian national team member. And no one had camera phones back then. So I would like go into the piece of paper and like write it down and go like, oh, like that's what, I think it was Karen Nystrom, like amazing player and great coach, builder of the game. And I was like writing down her workout. Like I voraciously would have consumed any of the content that I've now created basically for myself, And again, I've created very mindfully to that player who just wants more, irrespective of what level they are at. So whether that's, the products we sell or the hockey IQ videos I make or the camps I run, it's not about being the elite of the elite. Like, I can help you get there. I can only do so much. But I don't believe that only those players should get in the door, because then I would have never gone to a hockey camp, Vinny. Like, if it was only elite, like, I would have not gone till I was 17. Like, was that when I was elite? I would have just been excluded. And I probably would have never gotten to where I got, because I had that drive. I just needed someone to give me the resources or the opportunity. And so that's really what Total Female Hockey has been all about, is to give people access to the information and the inspiration and the opportunity to get to the next level, whether you're like 7 or 27. I think I got away from that a little bit. As a female coach who's played at a high level, of course, I started in the off-ice training realm, similar to yourself, and I would start training teams, and they loved it. And then inevitably, well, do you go on the ice? And I was like, well, I've taught hockey schools before, but like, I'm not. So then I start going on the ice, and then they're like, oh, do you want to coach? And you're like, okay, I'll coach. And you start like lower level competitive. And then, in some number of years, I'm coaching the top teams, top teams in the province or whatever. And then it did have to become elite. Just in terms of how you recruited those players or what have you. It's not that my hockey schools became any more elite, although my hockey schools were more like players who wanted to get on my team. I would have never done a U9 camp back then. I wouldn't have even known what to do, but it was very much sort of top tier for like 6 or 7 years. And I didn't hate it. I wouldn't say it's like necessarily like my comfort zone. Like, I'm not like, I can do it, but I'd have families come like, what line am I going to be on? And like, am I going to be on Team Canada? And I'd be like, I'm going to yell at you and you're going to get a lot better. Like, I can guarantee you that, but I'm not like, let me sell you on it. And like this, I'm going to get you a scholarship. And like that's coming from you, but I'll give you the path and the opportunity to do so. So I don't know that I was like cutthroat enough or whatever you call it to really, I had some great teams. I developed some great players, but there's a certain, you know what I mean? Like the cutthroatedness of that level here in Ontario, especially, wasn't always my bag. And then when COVID hit, I all shut down. Right. And I remember reconnecting with you then, because we both went into this like online training space, and you got there first because you're smarter than me. And I remember watching some of your videos and being like, well, this guy's got it. Because I remember sitting at home going like, I didn't miss necessarily my team I was training, or it wasn't like, oh, I really wanted to go to the provincial championship with this group. It was like that love of coaching and sharing and feeling like I was empowering somebody got taken away from me. And that was the part that was most challenging. It had nothing to do with the level. Right. And so I saw what you were doing online, with the garage workouts. Yeah. And I was like, I can do that. Yep. And I actually reached out to you and said, like, how are you doing that? And with the camera and all this kind of stuff. And so you inspired me. And I remember doing a workout and like just emailing my list and saying like, oh, we're going to show up on a blah at this time. And my garage back then was yellow and bright yellow. I remember, yeah. And yeah, we're going to do this yellow garage workout. And, I just sent it out into the universe. It was free, was whatever. And 100 people showed up to that workout. And I couldn't see them, right? Because like I learned from you, I'm like, if I see them all, then it's going to crash, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm like, hey, you guys got to be cameras off. But after the fact, I looked at like where everybody was from. Yeah. And like I had people from all over the world, as I'm sure you did. Like there were my girls that come to my camps who are all in Toronto, and they're like, oh, I see all them. And then there's like someone in Kazakhstan and someone in Great Britain and someone in Alaska. And I'm like, wait, this is why I actually started Total Female Hockey.
That's cool.
Like it wasn't just to train the best of the best in Toronto, right? Like that wasn't it. That wasn't my why. And all of a sudden, I started to get emails from people like, oh, like, my 7-year-old daughter's doing this with her friends and they're all at home, like obviously separated, but, they all make sure they click in. And I had like 57-year-old women being like, I never felt like I couldn't come to one of your camps before because it wasn't my age group. And now I'm getting to be coached by you and it's so cool. And it was a really like it was a hard reset because obviously a lot of my income was coming from
Right.
being on the ice with people
Oh, yeah.
at that time. So it was like, oh, as an entrepreneur, you're like, cool.
Right.
Everyone else like, oh, I don't have to go to work and I'm getting paid. I'm like,
Yeah.
I got to figure this out, right? Like
Exactly.
for me, like I can't just be sitting here doing nothing. So it kind of went all in on these Yellow Garage workouts, and it was amazing, as I'm sure it was for you. It became a significant revenue stream for me. I did it for almost 2 years, and people loved it, and I evolved a lot into it, and I became a better coach as a result of it. Because how the hell am I going to teach you to stick handle when I can't even see you?
Yep.
And so
language, yeah, same. Helped me so much.
Yeah.
Learning certain things. Yep.
And it was like a big aha moment that I didn't know I needed. But I realized, and I remember when I first started my business back in 2008, I sold an online training program, right? Like people wouldn't even give me their credit card half the time because they're like, oh, this is sketchy. Like, what's that?
Yeah.
And I remember I had built this like online audience because I was posting, like doing blog posts every day about women's hockey. And eventually, a bunch of people caught on, got them on my newsletter list, and I sold this product. And the first 2 people who bought it, one was in Toronto, and it was like a physical shipping product, right? One was in Toronto and one was in Japan. And I will never forget that moment. They both bought on the same day. And I was like, oh, man, I got to ship something to Japan. But I was like, someone in Japan
That's cool.
wants my workouts? That's nuts.
Yeah.
And so that was always, and still is, like anytime someone buys one of my products, I'm like, ooh, where are they from? Like, I just think it's so cool.
Yeah.
And that, that COVID time, as challenging as it was, it reignited that for me. And as a result of that, I actually stepped back a bit from coaching at the top level. My kids were starting to play, so that was part of the impetus. I got a lot more into coach development and player development on the association level. So it was kind of that like reset I didn't know I needed. But now, I laugh because a lot of the girls I coached when I first started coaching are now coaching our elite teams. Yeah. So they were 14 or 15 when I coached them. Now they're the coach of that team I was coaching back then. Yeah. And I remember when I coached them, I was like, oh man, I could never be on the ice with 8-year-olds. Like, what are we going to do? Like, no way. It was like U13 and up. I wouldn't even go to U11. I was like, what was a 10-year-old? Ugh. And now like all I do is these young ones. And, those women who I've had the pleasure of mentoring and helping in their journey, they're like, Kim, you would have, like, if you could only see yourself now, out there doing like ridiculous stuff with these 8-year-olds, back then, Kim was like a whole different, kettle of fish. Like it wouldn't have even been my bag. And so I think sometimes as coaches, to be receptive, I had no choice but to be receptive in that moment. But I do recall having like a very significant, oh, right. For 7 years, I've sort of been off track here. And now, I've realigned with where I'm supposed to be. And I know that can change over the course of everyone's career. And, sometimes, I'm doing stuff with my business. Is this really what I really want to be doing? Or is this truly my strength or what I'm aligned with? And I feel fortunate, because of the space I'm in and the experience and expertise I have, a lot of the stuff I throw against the wall tends to stick. But I've been fortunate because I usually have so many different silos. If I want to turn one a little bit more up, I want to be on the ice a little bit more, I turn that one up. If I want to do more of my hockey IQ videos, I turn that one up, or do more speaking, turn that one up. And, like I said, 2008, so we're 18, 19 years in now, like it's still a challenge. I still often think I have no idea what I'm doing. And, I'm learning every single day. And, they say like, you never work a day if you're like that. And, I work a lot. I love it. But I never, it goes back to that mindset I had when I was a kid. Like it's still that imposter syndrome. Do I know enough? Am I good enough? Am I delivering the best product I can to everybody? And to me, that's how I know I'm doing the right thing. And if I have that moment, like I did driving out as a pro going, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Mm-hmm. I guess I'm gonna have to find something else to be good at because this is all I've done for the last 20 years. But, it's pretty cool to do what you love and have created something that did not exist before. Yep. This didn't exist before I came into the space. I created for myself. Right. It doesn't really still exist. I'm still kind of the one who's leading it. And it's just so cool to get people reaching out. I had some girl I coached against who's like, I bought your dad bought me your product when I was like 10. And I used it as my workouts, and it's how I got to like this level. And now I'm coaching against her. And you're just like, this, first of all, it makes me feel old. Second of all, like, being in the epicenter of women's hockey, like it's just cool how many of these connections just keep coming back and keep coming back and keeping coming back. And it's just an honor to be able to do it. And I think, 13-year-old Kim would have loved it. And she would have been super stoked if someone had told her, like, you could actually do this for a job one day.
Yeah.
That could be your full-time job. So it's pretty cool. I'm pretty grateful for all of it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. And something really powerful to point out is what you brought up, alignment. It's interesting. I've been working on this, not a rebranding, but basically talking about, from our philosophy, right at the core, first principle of it, and alignments come up. And I've created this whole thing. I'm putting it out soon about there's such a tendency and focus on behavior in our, what's the behavior, right? And it's a lot of, what we see with cognitive behavioral work and all that, and it makes sense. But when you say alignment, I think that's such a powerful word of when you talk about the collective energy of how things work, having alignment is significantly more important than focusing on behavior, because the alignment is what ultimately leads into the behavior. And so I love how you brought that up and how you're feeling that energy, right? And going into it, which is going to be cool to watch how that evolves as time goes on. But talk about that aspect of, you've obviously aligned on the girls hockey aspect and you're there. And I think one of the biggest challenges that people think of as now your coach developer hat on is that when we talk about and think about, all right, girls versus boys, what is it that a lot of leaders potentially get wrong in that process on how they're dealing with girls versus boys, and understanding that these are very real challenges of when you're dealing with a girl, this is the reality of that you have to understand going in. Because I know there's a lot of men, right, that will do things helping out with the girls' game, but obviously men, there's a bias, right, of like, do you actually know how to deal with girls? And I'm learning with my daughter and coming up and trying to be a student of the game, but it's not natural for me. It's, so talk about the details on that of what you've experienced from a developer lens.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty unique in that, like, I've not really coached boys. I did at hockey camps when I was younger, but once I started coaching total female hockey, like, it's been no boys the whole time. Yeah. Like, and I do have actually quite a few parents who are like, can my son come too? And I'm like, no. Totally. Which, again, works in Toronto because of the market, and would probably work in Minnesota, probably work in Boston, like maybe a few other places. It's growing. But I've been fortunate I can sort of have this myopic focus on the girls. I would say there's two things that really stand out to me that I get told the most or commented on the most. One is this idea of that the girls should get less than, or they cannot receive as much of, or it shouldn't be as intense as what the boys are getting. And I think if I coach boys, Vinny, it would be identical. Like the X's and O's would be the same. Yeah. How I approach the game, the intensity I would bring to the rink. I don't think any of it would be different. So I'm fully confident that I could solve that problem or be successful in that arena. But what I consistently hear from parents is that, if their daughters starts on the boys' side, or if, maybe their expectation is that their daughter isn't going to get pushed as hard because she's in the female game, or it's a female camp, or it's a female instructor. And again, in my experience, maybe it's because they're such coach pleasers, maybe because it's new and they're like, oh my gosh, someone's pushing me. Like, I guess I got to go because I'm being pushed. They just rise. And I saw that when I coached older level players. But I'm seeing it even more when I coach the younger level players, right? Like the things I'm asking them to do, even when I look at like a skill curriculum, I'm like, I probably shouldn't try this yet, but like, let's just try it. And like, we do it for 10 minutes and I'm like, oh, like I was biased. Oh, I thought they wouldn't be able to do it, but now they're here. And that's a bit of the joy of having coached. I've coached the same age group because my daughters have, progressed through the same age group, but they're 2 years apart. I've coached U9 now for 4 years, and next year will be my 5th year of U9. And in my first year, I was like I didn't know what I was doing. I'm a professional skills coach. I've coached for 15 years. Like I know a lot, but I remember in the first practice, like blowing the whistle and be like, everyone to the neutral zone. And like these 7 and 8 year olds are like, what's a neutral zone? I'm like, okay, right. Okay. So I got to like figure all this out.
Oh yeah.
So in 4 years of doing it, I've really, I wouldn't say mastered, but I'm pretty confident in how I can push them physically, mentally, as a group to, play a creative game, to have some fundamentals that if they ever want to, go to a higher level of hockey, they've got a great foundation to start from. And that was often my challenge coaching at the top levels. I'd be like, how come these kids don't know how to do this? Or they hold their stick funny, or when they pass, it's weird. And they don't know how to protect a puck. And of course, when they're already 17, you're like, well, I can try to help you do it. But it would have been great if someone taught you this at 7. So I'm sort of solving the problems that I was frustrated by for a long time. But, just challenging them more than you like question yourself, going like, if this was same group of boys, would I be doing it in the same way?
Yeah.
And if the answer is yes, then cool. If it's like, I don't know, well, then like I would say, just try it and push them a little bit harder because in my experience, they respond well. Now, obviously, the way I'm delivering it, I'm often saying, okay, here's the challenge drill for today. Like, not like you guys can't do this, you suck. But come on, let's try this way harder thing. And they're like, let's go. Like, let's do it. I feel like the boys would respond in the same way. So that would be the first one, just that intent to push them, to challenge them in the same way you would, irrespective of gender. And then the second piece is the confidence piece. And this, I think, is the biggest difference. And I always use this example. Many years back, I was coaching U15 AA, which is the highest level in the province for that age group. And it's quite competitive because there's not that many teams. Like geographically, a lot of the organizations don't have teams. So it's quite competitive game in and game out. And I remember having a girl who I'd coached for a number of years, always kind of a goal scorer, like not the goal scorer, but like puts them in the net and a valuable offensive contributor to the team. And this would have been November, December. She hadn't scored yet. And a great teammate, lovely family. Like, you wouldn't have known she hadn't scored yet. Like, I knew she hadn't scored yet, but like, she wasn't like, oh, I didn't score again. Like, none of that. And I remember this one game. I remember the rink. They've since torn it down. I remember the rink. She goes out there, picks off a pass on the penalty kill, goes down, dangles the crap out of the goalie, bar down, and scores. We all go nuts. We know she hasn't scored. And of course, as you can imagine, that ignites her. She gets a hat trick that game. And so after the game, we're all like losing our mind. It's like one of those small hallways you go down. All the parents are there. Yeah, we win. She got a hat trick. She hasn't scored all year. And I remember this very specific moment. She comes out of the room. She goes to her mom. Her mom's lovely, like not a hockey person. She's like, oh my God, like you were amazing. And she goes, yeah, but Mom, did you see that pass I made on the power play? And she's right. So on the power play, she's wheeling behind the net. She gives the biggest pizza, like right to this girl in the slot. Girl goes down, scores pretty much the same goal she had scored on the power play. Just rips it bar down. I think we won the game 4-1, right? So maybe this was at 2-1 or something. This goal happens. And it really struck me in that moment. Like, that's what she was focused on. Like, everyone else is like fired up. It's like she won an Olympic gold medal, right? Like, this is, and all she could think about was this one like really bad pass. And it was a really bad pass, right? But in the context of that game, in the context of the year, it was nothing. And I see that all the time. And again, whether that's the younger girls, but more so with the older girls, the teenagers especially, that idea of like, it's got to be perfect. I can't make mistakes, that worry about being judged by your friends, by other girls, by your teammates. Often they don't want to stand out. And again, I haven't coached boys, Vinny, you would know better than me, but like, I can only imagine with a team of boys, if the coach is like, and yeah, Benny, you were amazing and you did this, Benny's going to be like, hell yeah, I was. And the girls, you tell them that and they're like this.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they don't want to be the one in the way that is celebrated, outwardly in front of their peers. So especially as teenage girls, like that's the worst, right? Because they just want to assimilate and be part of the group. And so I would say just this understanding that the boys tend to be overconfident, no offense, but like you got some house league boy who scores a goal and he's like, I'm amazing. Oh, yeah. Right. And then you have the girl gets a hat trick and she's like, that was okay. Right. But I had a tool that I used more so when I coached older, which I thought was really powerful. I would have our team every month. I did on paper, because I'm not smart enough to do it on an app, but we did on paper, and they would write their names, wasn't anonymous, and I would say, rate our performance this month on a 10. Okay. And we would talk about at the beginning what we would define as performance. But again, that encapsulates, the process part of it as well as the outcome goals. How were we? So I want to score our score out of 10, and I want your score out of 10. And of course, I've got all their stats. I've been at all the games, all this kind of stuff. And then it was, give me 2 things you want to improve on individually and 2 things you think the team could improve on. So it was really quick. We did it every month. They knew it was coming. They got the golf pencils out. It took maybe 5 minutes. Some of them did it, played on my team for 4 years. They're like, here's the thing again. I'm like, yeah, we're doing the thing again. And so it was really interesting. From a team perspective, they were almost always accurate. Right? Like maybe we didn't win a lot, but we played really well. Our power play got a lot better. We're a 7, right? Oh, we just killed it this month. We beat everybody. We made a couple upsets. We're a 9.5. Like they were almost always dead on for the score I would have given them. And I would report back and be like, hey guys, you guys gave yourself a 7.2 and I think you're right on it. Like that's exactly where I would have put you. I don't think we ever missed in 4 years. Like it was almost always on. It was fascinating the numbers they gave themselves. Like almost nobody was like, on occasion there was a girl who was like, I'm a 9, and you're like, oh.
Right.
But then like, I'm not going to correct you. Like if you believe you're a 9, I'm not gonna be like, no, Sally, you were a 6. I'm gonna allow you to believe you were a 9, and if like you have no idea what we're doing on the forecheck, I'm just gonna like try to align us on what the forecheck's supposed to be like, but I'm not gonna shoot down your 9. The ones that concerned me a bit were like, the kid who's on Team Canada was like, I was a 3. You're like, it's impossible that you were a 3.
Right.
Like, there's no way, and it's not even the goals and the assists, but like how you impacted the game, how you led in the dressing room, all the other stuff you did to get yourself in the position to make Team Canada or be the captain of this team. I'm like, a 3? Like, that's impossible. And so all that did is, and I didn't publish those scores, obviously, but those were opportunities for me as a coach to go, oh, Sally thinks she's a 3. So irrespective of how many goals she scored, how many games we won, like that's the number I need to work on. I need to have that connection to say, hey, like, I kind of had you at like an 8 or 9. So like, what's this coming from? Oh, I'm really tired. Or, oh, I thought I was going to get, my teammate or my Team Canada teammates on the other team, she led the league in scoring and I was 3rd. And so I'm a 3, right? Because of like one little thing, right? And so that was just a fun exercise for me. Like there was no other way to really get that intel, in a way that was safe to them. I didn't always go back to them with the number. Sometimes I just let it ride. Sometimes I let my assistant coach deal with it. So, but it was really interesting. That number rarely matched up with what I thought of them, or what us as coaches thought of them, or what any human watching the game would have thought of them. And again, it was hockey performance based. It wasn't, or I guess your value to the team based. But it wasn't like we weren't talking about school or real life or anything like that. It was just hockey. And so that, fueled that knowledge to me that like the confidence piece is really the most important thing. And I guess I had the numbers to prove it. Right. But now with younger kids, we're not necessarily doing that self-evaluation. It's actually harder. And you have to get to know the kids a bit more and know what a confident performance looks like versus a not so confident performance. And how does that manifest when they don't have all the skills yet? We have just basic shapes, not even really like systems. So how do you see that? And how do you help them when it's not going the way that you'd like it to or they'd like it to? And how do you celebrate it when it's going really well? I do find at these younger age groups, like if you give them the player the game had or you give them some like nod, they're all for it. Oh, yeah. And I know there's a change with the girls like 12, 13, where that flips. So we're not there yet with my daughters or their teammates, but I know having coached those older players for so long that they don't want to stand out and they're going to be harder on themselves than anyone else will be on them. And it isn't, I don't think I'm going to change it. I think it's just an awareness of it.
Yes.
And how you can quietly find ways to empower them and have them feel better, right? So they play better, even if they're already playing great, right? I think if you're playing great, but you're feeling bad, I don't really care if you're playing great, I guess is the way I don't like that trade-off, right? I want you to feel like confident and pleased with your performance and how you are impacting the game, whether you're the best player on the ice or not, or whether you had 5 shifts or 25. Like to me, that's harder to figure out at the younger age groups. But a very big challenge when coaching girls at older age groups. Even if you are female, if you're male, I think it would only be harder. But that's one little trick I used over the years, and it just opened the door for a conversation. In those conversations are the moments that I feel like I got the furthest ahead with those players. In a dressing room, on a walk, like not on the ice screaming at them. Those were, I think, as a coach, I was most transformative with them.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so informative. Like, appreciate you sharing that wisdom. It makes me think of a time when I was working with a college girls team and ended up singling out one of the girls in a negative way of sharing of like, hey, like how this impacted everybody else, what you did. But I could tell she was one of the leaders on what it did, but it shut her down and took away that receptiveness of no matter what we were trying to say, no matter how to work around it. And hey, this was good for the group. You could just tell lost her on it. So it was like such an eye opener, like, yeah, okay, there it is. That's yep, singling out. There it was. So I appreciate that. That's all.
And even when you do it positively, it
doesn't matter, right?
Well received.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's just that idea that I'm not a part of this team, that I'm somehow different for better or for worse.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what makes them such great hockey players, right? Is that in some ways there's that assimilation that needs to happen, but not at the expense of you owning, like we said, owning your strengths and feeling like you bring value beyond the number of goals you scored or the number of assists you got or the number of saves you made. And I think that's, I used to always put a quote on the board when I coached junior because we had a consistent dressing room. We don't have that often in Toronto now. But I was always mindful to say to the players, like, your value as a player is not the same as your value as a person. So, and I fought that a lot as a coach too. I win, I feel good about myself. We lose, I feel bad about myself. I score a goal, I'm great. I don't score a goal, I'm a bad human. And so, remembering that, is always something that we had to keep top of mind when these girls were chasing scholarships and Team Ontario and Team Canada and all these things that are huge goals and that mean a lot. And I never wanted to diminish those. But far too often they were equating their self-worth as a human with their outcomes as an athlete. And I think that's a really dangerous thing to do that I think a lot of athletes do. And so if we can help them, with some tools to offset that, but just even to keep it top of mind.
Yep.
And I think with teenagers, it's, always a challenge. I can only imagine with pro athletes, what that dynamic looks like. But I think that's an important message, male, female, to make them remember that at the end of the day, we're wearing knife blades and chasing a piece of rubber around, like, we're not solving world peace here.
Exactly.
So let's have perspective.
Amen to that. Well, as we wrap up here, final thing is, when you look back on your journey within the game, what's been your favorite part of how you've evolved as a human being throughout it?
I think I didn't realize till I was older the amazing mentors and coaches I had along the way. I was like really blessed. I never had that coach who like screamed at us and made us feel bad about ourselves. And quite honestly, I was actually, when I was in high school, I had Dave McMaster was my coach. He was the head coach of Team Canada in 1990 at the World Championships when they wore pink and white. It was the first time women's hockey was televised at a World Championship, and he was the coach of that team. He coached University of Toronto men and women, and he's just the most unassuming, like, man. Like, I only know that because someone else told me that. Like, it wasn't him being like, "Oh, I'm so great." And he was a high school coach in the area. He coached, I don't know how we got him, like, again, because I was just like, Dave's my coach, it's just normal. But I remember him, like, he was always family first, school second, hockey third. We had great teams. Almost all my teammates went to college hockey. A few of us went to the States. Most of them went to U of T or McGill and won national championships in Canada. And I remember him coming to one of my games in college. And just that moment of speaking to him afterwards, my dad drove him down because he was an older guy. And he came out and watched me play at Niagara. And I think we lost. It was like our first loss of the year. We were ranked number 1 in the country. I was mad, right? We're like number 1 team. I think it was like January. We hadn't lost yet. We lost. It was a double header. So we were playing them the next day and we destroyed them. But I remember having that conversation with him after the game and like just being so mad that we lost. And then him just like the perspective flip. He was like, oh my God, you're so amazing. And like, I think of you back when you're 15 and now you're 19 and look. And, like, so having him involved, like my dad wasn't around a lot when I played when I was younger. He was working all the time. And as I went through college and pro, he was there all the time. So he was watching the games. He would fly out to games. Even when I coached higher level, he would come and watch me coach. And, just to have that, like, and now he watches my daughters. Like, he's not watching me coach, but he's like talking to my daughter who's mini me and being like, oh, you got to try this and look at this. And, just that through line of, people, had influence. And even, now watching these women that I coached when they were 10, 11, 12 years old now be coaches, and they call me and they ask me for advice, and we go through a lot of hard stuff together. Like, somehow in being able to touch people all over the world, I've somehow had this tight community around it. And I think that's what stands out for me. And I hope that, wherever I go with hockey, and whether I'm in Toronto or somewhere else, like, that's the transformative stuff, right? Like, I won a lot of stuff. I've traveled all over the world coaching, and that stuff's cool, but it goes back to the family of it. And sometimes those family are your blood, and sometimes they're just the people, who are your biggest fans, or the ones who need the help from you the most. But that's the stuff I value the most. And, in the ways that it's challenging, and in the ways that it's affirming. But, nothing's better than coaching your own kids and seeing, the joys that they have and the challenges they have and all of that. Like, it just totally hits differently. And I would say, I'm super competitive to a fault. But like, when my 9-year-old's team is playing, I'm just watching it going like, this is so cool.
That's awesome.
This is amazing that I get to do this. And so, yeah, like, every text I get, email I get from all over the world, like, amazing. But it's always been about the community. And I don't think I realized that as I was going through it. Like, I thought everyone's dad flew to their college hockey games and their pro games. And I thought everybody had a national team coach. Like, when they were going, like, that was just my normal. I had so many female coaches going through.
Right.
Just like back then, was my college coach was female. I had 3 different female coaches while I was in high school. That's nuts. Like, compared to even what's going on today. So I think I was just so lucky to have these role models around me. And if I can be that to somebody else, and if, coaches, parents, players out there can remember, no matter where you are, there's always someone who's looking up to you, always someone who would just die to be in your position, or to have the influence you have, or have the opportunity that you have. And if you have that perspective, I mean, your love of the game will always stay strong. So I appreciate the question. And, I've been so lucky. I haven't had a lot of the like negative, you're crap, this isn't going to work, like the adversity. I've lost a lot of things, or, had injuries or whatever, but like the community and the support that have been around me, whether in my playing career or my entrepreneurial career, has always been super strong. So I'm grateful for that, and I'm grateful for the question, because I think we don't think about that stuff as much as we should when we're in the thick of it. Certainly in February of hockey season, we've been going for 6 months now.
Exactly.
It's important to have that perspective.
Exactly. No, and I appreciate you taking the time, and obviously being able to come on and sharing that. That's a massive insight. Again, sounds simple in nature, but we both know complex when we're out and about, but hearing that influence coming in, right, that's such a massive part of the process. So appreciate you. This is awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. And it was amazing. And I hope, I'm sure people took quite a bit out of it, and excited for the next time that we'll get on it. But how can people find you if they want to continue following?
Well, I drive a really bright orange car with my logo on it. So if you're in Toronto, you've probably already seen me and you thought like I was the pizza car. But so a lot of people find me there. But people can find me on the website. So totalfemalehockey.com. That's got links to our camps, our products, the hockey IQ development I do, the podcast that I do as well with Total Female Hockey. So that's kind of the hub for all of it. I'm also on Instagram, probably pretty poorly because I'm 40 something of doing my best. So that's at Total Female Hockey _. But yeah, and certainly if there's parents out there, players out there, coaches out there in the female game, and I can help in any way, the abundance of resources I have, articles I wrote back in 2008 that I sometimes unearth in my computer and be like, oh my God, I think I was smarter back then, or whatever it was. I'm very happy to share because, again, if I think about myself as a 13-year-old player or as myself as a 25-year-old coach and trying to navigate it all on my own, it's definitely about giving back. So yeah, totalfemalehockey.com. Hope you like orange because there's a lot of it there. But I'm just grateful to keep growing the game and giving back to the game that's given me so much.
Yeah, amen, amen. Well, again, appreciate you and the wealth of knowledge that you have and the wisdom and your gift, to the game. So it's amazing to have you on. And for everyone listening, if this conversation shifted how you see leadership, confidence, or the female game, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And as always, keep evolving and play for that feeling.
Thanks, Vinny.